The importance of memories, how it shapes and defines a person, and the value that they bring was a core theme of this episode of Silo, and with Camille being faced with a decision on whether or not to slowly erase the memories of 9,913 people in order to prevent the safeguard protocol was something that she was battling with. Jules had gone AWOL and was now taking matters into her own hands in looking to find Lukas Kyle so she could get answers on the outside, and Daniel Keene and Helen Drew were pretty much doing a Jules in looking to get their own answers on what the government was doing and why they're erasing Charlotte's memories. There were also a few subtle clues about what the actual silos are there for and how it could potentially be a game in a conversation with Steve, and Daniel's consciousness being cloned and being the algorithm is something that I also thought could be the case with what we were shown as well. But with it only being episode 3, there's still plenty more episodes to go until we can get some more answers. So within this video, I wanted to discuss the episode, break down the important details, and explain the ending. Here is Silo Season 3, Episode 3, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. What has Lukas Kyle been doing? Within the silo in this episode, there were basically two main missions that were taking place. One was Camille battling with the dilemma of having the lives of almost 10,000 people in the palm of her hand, which I'll get onto in the next section. But as well as that, we had Jules walking the silo by herself with the hopes of finding the answers that she was looking for, and also the location of Lukas Kyle. She was venturing lower and lower with the hopes of finding him and was speaking with anybody that had any kind of information. First off, we saw that she sent a message to Shirley and she chose to ignore it. Martha said that Jules trusted her gut, and that was a quality in her that was extremely different to everybody else in the previous episode. And with Shirley, she was trusting her gut that she'd come good for her and actually give her the help that she needed. However, once again, Shirley's selfish side came out because all she could do was blame Jules for not remembering her when she simply couldn't do anything about it. This is now actually causing me to find Shirley quite a frustrating character in this season because she's actually bringing nothing to the table and is just whining about Jules as if she's done something wrong when she literally can't help it. Jules was continuing to not take the memory suppression medication, and whilst she thought that she had the upper hand, she didn't know that her doctor Amy knew about that, and she also didn't know that her every move was being watched by the CCTV camera inside of her apartment. I do now think that Jules might cotton on to the fact that she could be getting watched because she saw that there was somebody following her even when she believed that she was on her own, so she might have her guard up just that little bit more when she's at home. Jules was almost navigating her thought process like a puzzle, and piece by piece as she spoke to Robert Sims about Lukas Kyle, then Shirley, and then Knox, she gradually got deeper and deeper within the silo. This was to the point where if she couldn't get taken to the Digger Void, then she was gonna go down to the mines, the place where Lukas Kyle was originally sent after having the red level relic before being made Bernard's shadow, because she felt like if there was a place where somebody wanted to truly hide, it would be there. It's a place where people essentially go to die, and as we've seen, Lukas Kyle was actually perceived to be dead by those of power and authority there, as he hadn't been seen in around 93 days. That streak came to an end though when Camille caught wind of Jules looking for Lukas Kyle in the mine, with Lukas Kyle hearing of the safeguard protocol in the previous season, going down to the Digger Void and seeing a tunnel and also signs of what life used to be like. He was warned by the algorithm to never speak a word of it, hence why he said nothing to Sims in the season 2 finale. So with Kyle being inside of the mines, it was theorized that he could well have been digging horizontally because he wanted to try and replicate the tunnel that he saw and maybe dig across to a different silo. Lukas Kyle knows that he has nothing to lose now because he's wanted by the authorities, and he knows that if he speaks a word of what he saw, then the silo would quite literally be doomed. So that's why I believe he's taken matters into his own hands and is just working in silo. With Lukas Kyle going on the run and eventually being found by Danny and Sandy, Patrick Kennedy is going to finally get his hands on Lukas Kyle, and us knowing that Paddy Kennedy has tunnel systems built that raiders and authorities have no way of locating, I believe the group is going to start to come together and work collectively in looking for a way out and a way of finding the truth. Camille's dilemma. Camille and Robert Sims' dynamic has changed drastically in this new season of the show, as out of the two, she's now the person of authority, and what I'm kind of loving about it is that Robert Sims doesn't know how to handle it. There was a key focus on memories and the importance of them by Robert after he spoke with Jules, and he saw how she couldn't remember her father and the fact that he sacrificed himself for her and the people that she cared about. He didn't want that to be the case with his own son, and he was fixated on making memories with him, so he'd always have a positive memory. However, as we know and as we saw, the algorithm was persuading Camille to do the opposite and to hook up the vitamin D plus into the water system in Silo 18 so that on a low and slow method, the people would slowly start to lose their memories and they'd have no recollection of what was going on, who Juliette Lewis was, and it would eradicate any hope of them going outside. It would almost reset them to ground zero and be like day one all over again. With us seeing the effects of what memory loss had done to Jules, and Camille also seeing that, Camille was reluctant to roll it out because she feared that she'd lose all sense of individuality, her identity, and the memory that she had of her family. She didn't want to be an empty shell just like Jules. This was actually the option that seemed more appealing and less harmful though, because if Jules continued her method of trying to disrupt the peace and search for answers, then the safeguard protocol could be initiated. And also if Lukas Kyle were to make contact with another silo, then that would be a violation and it would lead to the safeguard protocol being initiated. So memories being erased was almost the lesser of two evils, because at least that way people would still have a form of life, even if they couldn't remember who they were and who it is that they formed relationships with. Robert Sims putting a focus on memories was what ultimately led Camille to reveal to him about the vitamin D plus plan and that she was willing to hook it up to the water system, and she said how they made a promise that they'd do anything to keep their son alive, even if it meant forgetting them. Camille is struggling in this position of power because the lives of all of the people inside of the silo were quite literally in her hands. Right now, she has to decide whether she plays the risk and allows them to perish, causes them to forget their memories, or just hopes that it all blows over. This is actually where I think the scene of Daniel and Helen going to see Steve connects to the silos. When they went to see him, he was fixated on a game of chess, and the moves that he was making were getting a key focus too. With the important decisions and moves that Camille is needing to make at the moment, I actually wonder if the silos weren't all put there to ensure human survival. But I actually wonder if 51 were put there because what we're essentially watching is a 352-year-old game that's going to basically continue until only one silo survives. So the silo that does is essentially going to be the population that's allowed to repopulate the United States and build a better future. That could also be why no other silos are actually allowed to come into contact with each other, because it would ruin the experiment and test. At the end of the previous episode, we saw that Camille was shown the chart of the mood in the silo and how if Jules was suddenly removed or if she regained her memory, then the mood of the silo would change, something that would prove to be damaging. But now, with Jules being dragged out by Lukas Kyle after inhaling some of the gas and her being in an unconscious state, Camille could make Jules seem like she was a martyr and that she was heroic for what she did whilst deliberately making sure that she never wakes up. This would take away the sudden removal concern and it would actually allow her positive legacy of the silo to live on. It would take away the threat and it would actually mean that Camille wouldn't have to be responsible for 10,000 lives, only one. Camille said that she was going to do it, and with her having the opportunity to save the silo in more ways than one by allowing the people to keep their lives and also their memories, she's going to aim to sacrifice one person for the greater good. I don't think it's actually going to play out like that though. While Camille is becoming a more and more ruthless character, I think we're going to see Robert Sims begin to soften up and almost not recognize his wife anymore. What he suggested of wanting to make memories was something that she would have snapped up in season 1, but with her almost not caring about it, I think he's going to notice a difference in her. The scene where he was basically kicked out of her office because the information was sensitive and there being a focus on that door being closed on his face, it really does make me think that she's going to change to the point where he believes that what she's doing isn't for the greater good. If it does come down to the vitamin D plus needing to be used, I feel like the importance that he placed on memories is what's going to prevent him from being on side with her. Daniel and Helen are being watched. Daniel Keene and Helen Drew are both on the same side at the moment in wanting to get answers about what happened when Charlotte and her colleagues flew through the cloud on the Iran mission that caused them to crash land and for all of them to die other than Charlotte. Daniel went to one of the pilot's memorials, Juan, and it was here where Daniel found out even more information on the comms being downgraded because they weren't interceptable by jamming. But what we also found out during this conversation was that the crash was actually recorded. This is actually where their entire storyline from the episode came from. With them meeting with Steve, who was somebody that was able to access parts of the internet that not everybody could, he made an analog recording of the crash, and the importance of the recording is because I think the listening of it by Charles could be the very thing that takes her mind back to it and allow her to remember. We were told how items of the past had the capability of triggering memories, and like Jules with the helmet of Silo 17, that could be the very thing for Charlotte. Charles is being given the medication because the government clearly don't want her to remember what she saw. Was that massive cloud a weapon that the US was housing up there, and could the releasing of this information that's out there compromise the mission that they were on, and maybe even the next move that they were planning on making? Personally, I think it might, and it might actually incriminate the US. The captain of the Nimids was the person that we saw looking on at Helen and Charlotte in episode 2 of the show when Helen was trying to get information out of her. And within this episode, he was popping up left, right, and center. He definitely doesn't want the information to come out about what happened, and that's why we saw him at Juan's memorial speaking with his father, but continuing to look over at Daniel Keene, while we also saw him at Helen's Gen Z place of work that's most definitely not the Washington Post, and maintaining eye contact with her as she left, and also why I think it is that he broke into Steve's den and took the recording that he had of the crash. He doesn't want any information to leak out because it could disrupt the stability of the United States, nor does he want anybody to remember it. Hence why he's basically silencing Helen and removing all evidence of it happening in the physical world and also in Charlotte's mind. Do I think the tape recording is destroyed? No, I don't. I think it's going to make an appearance later on down the line in this season or maybe in the next one, and that will be where we'll see Charles regaining her memory. Daniel and Helen's next move is going to be crucial, but it's this next move that I actually think is going to be the moment where Daniel could drift to the other side of Helen, as I reckon he's going to end up having a heavy hand with the Silo's creation. Paul Billings' investigation. Sheriff Paul Billings was a man on a mission in episode 3 to find Orla Kent following her sister reporting her missing. I previously mentioned how I thought it was strange that her boyfriend didn't report her missing along with her sister when she did, but in this episode we found out that her new boyfriend was once actually with Ed Harwood's daughter, who was the previous shadow to the head of supply, the position that Orla was in. In the first episode, we saw that Ed and Orla had a feud with one another, and whilst it seemed like there was some tension, I didn't think it would erupt this soon into the season. When it was revealed that there was a body that was found inside of the mines that had been impacted by the gas and they weren't a miner, we saw that it was actually Orla Kent. She had the sheet over her face which symbolized that she could be dead, but it wasn't actually confirmed. It might have just been over her to prevent her from inhaling any more fumes. If she is dead, then the death most definitely has something to do with the Harwoods and the new boyfriend that she had. He knew where she was going when she left him because she planned on investigating the disappearance of items, so I think he must have revealed the information to Ed or his daughter, and that's when they could have taken her and then led her to the mines. It's a maze down there and it's a place where people go to be forgotten, so she might have been down there and not been able to get herself back. I don't think they would have planned for her to have been killed like that because they didn't know the gas was coming, but I believe they planned on getting her out of the equation, so maybe Ed's daughter could reclaim her position. Orla did have a scratch on her, so I imagine that came from some kind of conflict in the process. I imagine Billings is going to open up a murder investigation and we could begin to find out what Ed and his daughter actually had planned. My review of the episode. I thought this was another solid episode of Silo Season 3. I enjoyed seeing Jules navigating through the silo and looking to take control of her own fate. She trusts nobody, and it's quite nice seeing Jules acting the way that it feels like she always has. She's just kind of regaining a little bit of that identity again. As I said earlier, I think the writing of Shirley is a bit poor at the minute. I just don't feel that would be anybody's genuine reaction, and it's making me dislike the character, which I'm not actually a fan of. It's an interesting writing choice. As much as I've been enjoying the cutting between the different time periods, I did quite like the fact that we spent more time than usual inside of the silo. It allowed the plot to develop well and for us to feel tension building between Camille not being able to keep control of Jules and Jules actually getting closer to Lukas Kyle. I did find it a bit too much of a coincidence that Lukas Kyle was miraculously down there and was the very person that saved her. I could tell that the legs emerging from the smoke would be his long before any legs even appeared. I do think the before time is an interesting angle to explore, and I did love the hints and clues about the silos almost being like a game, something that was entertaining. I also thought when Steve took Daniel's identification badge and cloned it made me think of that theory even more about the algorithm being based on a copy of Daniel Keene, because it does sound a lot like him. Usually, I'm not actually a fan of Robert Sims' performance, but I actually thought he did a good job in this episode. I rolled my eyes a bit when he came on screen, but by the time his scene ended, I thought he carried it really well. You could feel the emotion and love that he had towards his family and that he wanted to do all that he could to ensure their safety, so he delivered a much better performance than what he did during the season premiere. If we're going to get a much more emotional Robert Sims, then that could play into the character more. The pacing of this season is a little on the slow side, but I don't actually mind that. I feel we've got a lot of obstacles and hurdles to overcome, and by allowing us to have the room to do that, it's adding to the level of immersion even more. As much as I'm finding the character Camille interesting and the new position that she's got with the conflict that she has in her mind over what it is that she needs to do, I am getting a bit tired of just seeing her in the room speaking with the algorithm. The scenes just all look the same, and I feel like it's the only time we really see her. With Daniel and Helen, I have been enjoying seeing their story develop, and as interesting as it was to know that there was a recording of the comms during the crash, it did just kind of feel like their story went round in a circle and didn't actually need to have as much screen time as what it did. It's the first time I've found that story to be a bit stale and not as engaging, but I imagine that will change as the episodes go on. It feels like Jules is getting closer to regaining her memory, and she's also having more eyes on her than ever too. With her being in a critical condition and with Camille saying that she'd do the dirty work and end it left the episode on a real cliffhanger. Like I said earlier, I don't think she'll go through with it, but it left so much room for theories, so I'm excited to think about it over the next week. So, there you have it, Silo Season 3 Episode 3, Ending Explained.